Right, welcome back. This is the part-time trader with the weekly market view. As per usual, nothing that you are about to see or hear constitutes financial advice. I'm not an investment professional, and I certainly hate to think that people would make investment or financial decisions off the back of any of my content. So please take anything you see here on YouTube or on X with a pinch of salt. It's all intended for entertainment purposes, but hopefully you find some of it entertaining and maybe occasionally informative too. Right, this week's episode, I am going to take you through lower time frames on Bitcoin, how I'm seeing the state of the crypto market play out, whether anything has changed on my kind of macro thesis for crypto, which is that I believe we are partway through a historic correction, one that will take Bitcoin as low as $3,000 to $4,000 in late 26, early 27. Once I've done that, I'm going to look at the commodities markets, specifically oil and gold, and then take a look at a few UK-based low-cap stocks that I like the look of, because I believe the real alt season is not going to be in crypto. It's actually going to be in micro-cap equities in the energy and commodity space, at least here in the UK, which is where I'm based. So let's get to it. Thanks for tuning in again. If you haven't done so already, definitely hit me up over on X. Follow me through my handle at Part-Time Charts. And please do hit the subscribe button if you like today's content. Hopefully I can bring you more like this over the coming months. Right, let's take a look at Bitcoin. Not much has changed, and I've been saying this for a while. You can see that volatility in Bitcoin has just been sucked out of the market for the last month or so. We've had this sideways movement. We came back, we swept these lows down here. We've now reclaimed those, and we've headed back up to the upper boundary of this descending broadening wedge, and this downtrend resistance continues to hold again. I've been saying for a long time that only a daily close above that line will leave me bullish for more upside. I did, as some of you who follow me on X will know, I did attempt some longs on this breakout here the other day, but with really tight invalidation, and once we broke back underneath, I was out of the trade for a mere scratch. Since then, not much has happened. Last few days, this week, have been largely sideways. Today, again, we've got what seems to be a wick to the downside shaping up here in the daily. I have said repeatedly that although nothing has changed in my mind, and I still see Bitcoin heading down much, much lower than anybody or almost anybody seems to be able to imagine. I can definitely see Bitcoin heading into the 3 to 4 to possibly 5k region in 26, 27, and I see equities going the same way. Nothing has changed. I think the picture looks incredibly bearish, and check out some of my earlier videos if you want some of that macro view on equities and why I think that we're in for a historic crash that will match that we saw in 2008 and before that in the year 2000 as the dot-com bubble popped. So nothing has changed in the bigger picture, but short term, you've got to play what's in front of you. And this formation is one that if it broke and Bitcoin started to hold here, I would definitely see that as a trigger for more upside. I've talked already about two potential areas where I see targets if we make that move. So if we got a move out here and we started to hold on the daily, I would be looking for this as the first target, and for these highs to be taken out as the second target, so in this region here. Now, it has occurred to me recently that if equities bounced, and again it would only be a bear market bounce in my opinion, if we did see some sustained upside for 2, 3, 4 weeks on the Nasdaq, that Bitcoin could go as far as holding here and then heading back up to take out the highs. And on the weekly, that would look something a little bit like this. So we could revisit what I see as the upper boundary of this giant sort of megaphone pattern even, that I've been talking about since the back end of last year, 2024. in a way, if that happened, right, if we had a couple of really strong weeks and price ended up taking out the previous all-time highs, revisiting this trend line here, up at the sort of 115, 116k region, if that happened, to me, I guarantee everybody would be mega bullish up there. But that would be quite similar to what we saw at the end of the bear market, sort of an inverse of this. If I flip this, you can see here, everybody was waiting for new lows. People kept talking about Bitcoin going much lower. And then all of a sudden, this big candle was sort of reversed after a short period of consolidation. And I could see something similar unfolding here. If we start to hold above the trend line, I'd be looking for upside. First of all, like I say, we'd be looking for a move coming in to this key zone, which held as support for the last couple of months of 2024. And then we'd be looking at taking out all the liquidity that sits here at the 100k region, and then potentially trading back up to the top of this trend line boundary. But that's a big if at the moment. And I've been saying that I think it's longing Bitcoin, especially before this resistance breaks, is a risky business at the moment. There is so much volatility and risk in the markets, and I am seeing this as a counter trend rally, because I do believe we are beginning to see Bitcoin roll over, and that on the monthly chart at least, we are starting to see some real weakness that is likely to be sustained for some time. So any move back up into this region I would see as being really short term, and I anticipate eventually, and I've posted charts like this before, that eventually we are going to come down and do something like this in 2027 stroke late 26. Now, people think that's impossible. Lots of people tell me I'm mad for believing that. Quite frankly, I don't really care. I have my thesis. I think there's some solid analysis behind it, and you can check out my previous videos to see that in a bit more detail. But long story short, nothing has really changed on Bitcoin. You know, if we see a break, that'll be the trigger for more long. But while we're under this downtrend resistance, and especially off the back of a fake out, where if you look, if we get really tight on the 4 hour, you know, we had this downtrend, which has been really clean, to be fair. And earlier in the week, on Tuesday, we saw this breakout, but it turned out to be another bear flag off the back of a bigger bear flag, and price quite quickly got back under. And now look what's happening. If we get really tight up against this trend line, this is starting to hold as resistance again. So in my mind, it would be perfectly reasonable for price to just reverse and go the other way, come back into this region. Now, what could happen there is that we put in a higher low and we come back up and we get the reversal. Again, I would only be trading this if we get a daily break above this downtrend. Until then, I'm not interested. And I suspect that risk reward is skewed quite heavily in favor of bears until that downtrend breaks. So that's lower time frame on Bitcoin. And look, I keep saying, I've been saying for a long time that you have to try and piece the puzzle together by charting multiple assets. So if you're interested in what the future holds for Bitcoin and crypto, don't just look at Bitcoin, try and get your clues from elsewhere. One of the biggest clues I think exists at the moment on the state of the market is the Solana versus gold chart. I posted a version of this earlier in the week where you can see that this uptrend has held for some time, and just recently we've started to get rejected from a backtest of this trendline support that is now flipped into resistance. So unless we see a big reclaim here, the fact that we're rejecting off of this tells me that more downside looks more likely. And I mean, you can go back. I first posted this at the end of March. Before the trend line broke, I said that we're due significant downside on Solana, and that the gold versus Solana pair was indicating that we were pretty much on the brink of a massive downturn. So despite the fact that on the USD pair, we seem to have reclaimed this key support and resistance zone here, and I kept saying that any move back into this grey zone will be a good long from a risk reward perspective, and we have seen that wick down into this region yesterday, and I've outlined the two targets that I see for upside. The challenge I have with going long on Solana right now is that the Solana versus gold chart does not look positive, and until we see that reclaim, I would be very, very cautious. And I'm starting to wonder whether this is all a trap and that we get back under, and that would be the trigger for a big swing short, potentially, as I've outlined before, taking us to as low as $3 to $5 on Solana at some point. Let's just take a look around at what else we can find in the charts. So I've talked about the importance of charting multiple pairs, looking at different altcoins and where they're at, looking at crypto versus other assets, not just US dollar, but also thinking about it versus hard commodities like gold, which is obviously trending heavily at the moment. This is a chart that I haven't looked at for quite some time, but this is Bitcoin versus SPX, the S&P 500. And I drew this ages ago and I've not looked at it, but what strikes me is that we seem to have this really clean channel that formed. And if you remember, when this turned out to be a big deviation and we got back under and we back tested, at this point in sort of like autumn 2024, I thought that this was going to be a major top and that we would come down and begin our descent. What happened was that price got pushed back up one more time, but we saw a second deviation above this big trend line. And what's interesting is that now, for a sixth time potentially, if you count these two here, you can see resistance, resistance, support, resistance, support, and now resistance. A really clean bounce off of that trend line on Bitcoin versus the S&P 500. So again, I'm open-minded about lower time frame opportunities to long on Bitcoin if we get the breakout on the dollar pair, but the fact that we are being rejected at this key trend line on what potentially looks like a big ascending channel, for me that's quite telling, and it's certainly given me pause for thought on becoming short-term bullish. And then what else have we got that we can look at? Well, look, Floki is an absolute shitcoin, like many of the pointless memes that have been pumped into existence in recent years, and I've got no interest in the coin or the project myself, but I do like to take a look at multiple assets to try and gauge where the market is. And I said back in February that the breakdown of this big rectangle pattern here, losing the support that kept price up for the best part of 2024, was not a good sign. And you can see blue squiggle of death. I pointed to a break of this uptrend, and that would signal a much steeper decline back into these lows that were formed in June 2022. We've seen some of that, so we've seen continued sell-off after breaking the underside of this rectangle. Trend line is now broken. To me, this looks really clear. I mean, unless you see a big reclaim here, which would probably drive the price significantly higher, which I just struggle to see, it looks a bit like the Solana gold chart in that a long-term uptrend that has held price up going all the way back to 2022 has now given way. So when I look at Solana versus gold, when I look at Bitcoin versus gold, when I look at some of these altcoin charts, I'm struggling to see a world in which Bitcoin is super bullish and goes back to 100, 110, 116k. I will be open-minded, and like I say, if we get that break there, I'll reassess. But for now, I'm looking at Solana, I'm looking at Floki, I'm looking at lots of other altcoins, and I'm just thinking, this does not look good, this market does not look healthy. And interestingly, just to celebrate a quick win. You know, if you go back, I posted this at the weekend, so we saw this massive sell-off on Monday. I thought it was Sunday, but maybe that's strange. All of the days are now Monday on my charts. Oh, it's because I'm looking at the 2-week view. Silly. If you go all the way back to Sunday and you look at this massive sell-off, I was celebrating the fact that we had hit my first higher time frame target on Mantra, but just a healthy reminder to everybody, I suppose, that we saw something like a 400 or 500x move, 520x move from bottom to top on Mantra. Nobody talked about it all the way up. Like, honestly, I don't remember seeing a single post on Mantra. I'd completely forgotten that the coin existed. And then I produced this chart back in February saying that we were topping out here, that we had hit this kind of trend line resistance, that we were way overbought, and that I saw something like this blue path playing out. And if you go back and look at the tweets, I mean, it's just hilarious to see in hindsight people, you know, the classic have fun staying poor, you don't know what you're doing, you're a part-time trader. And dear oh dear, I mean, what, we were down 84% in a day at one point. At one point, I think we were down over 90%, like 94% in a single day at one point on Mantra. So look, just a healthy reminder, don't have any complacency. People keep telling me, oh, crypto's not going to go as low as you think it is. You guys must be mad if you believe that it's impossible for us to see a 95% drawdown on some of these assets. They are worthless. There've been very few proven use cases for crypto, and the vast majority of these coins, I'm sorry to say, have benefited from what is likely, in hindsight, will be proven one day to be heavy manipulation. And if you are on the wrong end of some of those trades unwinding, and you are holding altcoins up here, you know, if you were buying up here, you've just been destroyed. That's what this market does to people. So have an open mind would be my take. Look, none of this is advice, right? I'm just sharing ideas. But if I were to give you one piece of advice on crypto and financial markets, it's just to be open-minded. You might look at my charts and you might say, this guy's mad. But, you know, look back historically at some of the moves that we've seen. This kind of collapse is not that unusual in the crypto space. And if you're on the wrong end of it, it can be brutal. You know, I know lots of us are bullish long-term. For me, I'm preserving my capital, trying to grow my capital through alternative markets, and I will return to crypto when I see reason to do so. But right now, the weakness that is out there, I think honestly some of my downside projections will look generous in hindsight. I think some of these coins are going much lower than even I anticipated, and some of them might not ever come back. That's the joy of this market, right? So that's Mantra, and another reason why I am struggling to see upside for the crypto market and for Bitcoin in particular. So look, as far as I'm concerned, nothing's changed. I'm out of the crypto market and I will not be getting back in for a very long time, potentially as long as 2 years. What else is happening across the world? Well, let's take a look at oil. Last week we got this big collapse in the price of oil. 2 weeks ago, where this long-term support gave way. And at the time, if you look back at the video I posted over last week or the week before, I flagged that we needed to show strength in this region after wicking down beneath this trendline support. And I think we've seen some of that. Last couple of weeks, we've definitely seen buyers step in. And as I keep flagging, if we reclaim all of these lows, to me, that is a strong sign that the oil market is going to bounce back in a big way. And again, you can see it a bit more clearly on this chart. You know, if we reclaim this red zone, we move up into this region, then I will be building an even bigger position in oil equities, trying to benefit from that trend. And it's a trend, I think, that could last a while yet. I think if we get, you know, this descending triangle has been shaping up for 2.5 years now, nearly 3 years. You know, if we see a breakdown and a reclaim, I think the upside could be massive. Breaking this downtrend in particular would be huge for the oil market. So that's where I'm interested in deploying my capital. I will not be touching crypto of any shape for at least a year, but probably 18 to 24 months. And in the meantime, I'm looking at commodity markets for opportunities. Right, what else is happening in the commodities market? So just really briefly, let's look at the gold chart. Big breakout back in early 24 from this rectangle accumulation. We've seen a lot of upside since then. So, the price of gold, just since this breakout alone is up 57, 58%. I think we're just getting started. I think the oil market, having broken this key trend line here, which you can see a bit more clearly on the 3-month chart, I think there's a lot more upside out there for gold. However, short term, look, I'm always a bit loathed to buy something that looks like this. And if you look back historically, you see some of these short-term tops in the market are when the RSI on the monthly is overbought to this level. It doesn't mean we can't see a bit more upside in the short term, but I would certainly be cautious about diving into the gold market right here. That said, if you look back, I think the trend is really strong. Lots of people are trying to call a top on gold, and I wonder whether, rather than having a major correction, which a lot of people are anticipating, sort of 2008 style, when equities were diving into the abyss, gold did something like this and was down, I think, about 35% from top to bottom. We could see something like that, and I could certainly see us come back in to retest this region here before heading up. But equally, it's worth being open-minded about the idea that price could just go sideways, as it did here back in 2006 for 6 to 12 months. And if we saw that accumulation, A, I think would be a great buying opportunity on gold, but B, could also be, as momentum slows in the gold price, that could be the opportunity we need to see gold miners really pick up a head of steam. And we've seen some really positive price action on gold miners in recent weeks, but I believe the trend is just getting started. And I think particularly for those low and mid cap stocks, I think there is a hell of a lot more upside to be had. So definitely a market to keep my eye on. And I will wrap up with a quick look at some of the ways that I'm looking at taking advantage of what I see as a real boom in equities attached to the commodities market. And in particular, some of these UK stocks, these really low cap, some of these are, like a few million market cap. So these are tiny, tiny equities. And when we talk about alt season, we talk about life-changing gains. The likes of Solana and AVAX and Doge and others have at least made lots of paper millionaires in recent years. I'm not sure how many people have actually managed to cash out and avoid the wild swings that you get in crypto. But on the face of it, all of us are looking for those outsized gains, right? And it's my view that some of these low cap equities attached to the commodities market actually present the cleanest opportunity to make some serious money over the next 2 to 3 years. And here are a few of them. What I'm seeing is this consistent pattern of a really clean downtrend, sort of bump and run bottom that could end with a really violent reversal to the upside. So ECR Minerals is listed on the London Stock Exchange on AIM, which is the low cap exchange. And I believe this is just one of a number of examples where the company is starting to look good fundamentally. Exploration seems to have taken a really positive turn on a lot of these stocks, just as the price at which they're able to sell some of their commodities that they're mining, that they're producing, is going through the roof. So some of these are still trading at the lows, while, as we've seen, gold is up, 100% off of the 2022 lows at the end of the correction that we saw in markets at the end of 2022. So to me, some of these are trading at a ridiculous discount, and from a technical perspective, I'm seeing this pattern over and over again. This is tertiary minerals, again, really clean downtrend. I will be waiting for this to break before going big on some positions that I see massive upside opportunity for. I don't think this is going to unfold overnight, but were you to wait until this trend line breaks, and let's say it breaks here, a move back to the origin of this bump and run bottom pattern, you're talking about 160x. So is that going to happen? Obviously, I don't know where price is going to slow down, but I do believe that once we start to see some of these levels breaking, that we are going to see some quite rapid gains, and if you capture even just a relatively small part of the potential move back into this area, I think we could be talking about serious money. So ECR and tertiary minerals are two companies that I'm looking at, and then lo and behold, another very similar chart. This is Besant Resources. I am hoping that we're going to get one last sweep to the downside here to take out these lows, a bit like we did here before we start to see some moves to the upside. But when this eventually breaks and starts to hold as support, I will be targeting much, much higher prices on some of these stocks. And again, look, am I likely to buy here and then hold all the way up, for 870x? Probably not. But if I can capture a 5, 10, 20x move on some of this and multiply my capital before the crypto and equity markets bottom in a couple of years' time, to me that feels like a really good opportunity. And some of the technicals on these are so clean that I can get in with limited risk, and obviously my bullish bias will be invalidated if we get back underneath this trend line. So waiting for the break on all of these, and then just a few of the bullish charts that I've posted over on X at Part-Time Charts. But hopefully that gives you an insight again into how I'm seeing the market at the moment. Certainly nothing to be bullish on in crypto world until this breaks, and even if it does, I think we're seeing short-term upside, but ultimately, in my view, crypto's fate is sealed, and holders are going to be shocked by what comes over the next 18 to 24 months, which I think is going to look something like that. Right, on that happy note, I hope you have a fantastic weekend. Thank you for tuning in once again. Like I say, please hit the subscribe button if you find any of this useful. Also open to taking recommendations from people, or requests I should say, from people who would like me to chart assets that you're interested in. Hit me up on X if you've got any of those. Hit the subscribe button on YouTube to help me grow the channel and bring you more content. Best of luck with everything. Remember, none of this is financial advice, but I hope you have found some of it entertaining and perhaps mildly useful. Take care. See you soon.